right, Everett, I know you want specific propositions. You want me to assert what I believe the facts are. What is the world? What is consciousness's place in it? So on and so forth. I can't do that. I've been trying to think of some assertions I can't. What I can do is talk about epistemology, because whenever I assert a belief about what I think the facts are, behind that is a certain epistemological framework. And, Descartes had to do a lot of philosophy, and epistemological justifications had to be put in place in order for him to come up with science. Science isn't just this, obvious, clear method that is good and true and beautiful. It has to be argued that it is such, and there have been plenty of arguments against some of the things that Descartes asserted, and that's really one of the reasons that science has changed so much in the last century or so. We no longer assume what Descartes and Newton assumed and Galileo assumed, that we could know the objective world in human language and actually be able to literally, just as God wrote Genesis, we could literally write out how everything came to be the way it is. Science is a little bit more humble now, more practical, more pragmatic, which in many ways is good. In many ways it's interesting because it leads to a lot of technology, and it leads to technology being considered an end in itself, like it's a foregone conclusion that we ought to always progress, when I think technology doesn't allow us to make progress. It just changes the way we experience ourselves, changes the way we communicate with each other. It doesn't make it better necessarily. I mean, certainly medical technology has increased our lifespan, but it hasn't increased the quality of our lives, while we're still alive. So epistemologically, I think the main difference between an embodied approach to consciousness and a scientific or representational approach to consciousness is that the embodied approaches would say that the knower and the known, the subject and the object, they're not separate. There's no clear line between the two. And quantum physics, I think, is really what forced science to cease being Cartesian, in the sense that it thought it really could remain outside of the observation and not interfere with what it was measuring. We know now that that's not really possible. And all of our scientific investigation is always interfering with what is being investigated. You set up a laboratory condition and you measure the neural correlates of consciousness in this very abnormal and isolated, atypical situation for a human being to be in, and then you measure their brain states and come to certain conclusions about what consciousness is based on that. And it's great, and you can get great data from that and certainly learn a lot, but to expect that to reveal the essence of this phenomenon, I think is naive, because what about people actually acting in the real world, where there's all this political stuff going on, history is writing itself, and people are falling in love and having their heart broken and watching their family members die and other family members be born, and actually experiencing their lives in a human social context. The kind of cognitive neural activity that goes on in those environments is probably a lot more complicated than what goes on in the laboratory. because the laboratory is always a contrived situation where we are interfering with what we're trying to understand. So I guess I'll leave it at that. And I can't argue with you on the level of science about what the best theories are or about what the data is really telling us. I can only try to question the underlying philosophical assumptions about the scientific conclusions that are being drawn based on the data. So we'll see where we can get with that. And I'm always, of course, willing to change my mind and learn something new about what science has to offer. So thanks for listening to this second attempt to state some propositions. So take it easy.